Hi folks, this is Ryan from Roll to Hit, just following up on last week's episode where we're moving our way across the top of the player character sheet. And last week we talked about kind of choosing your race. And really the lesson there is to choose one that sounds cool. And spoilers, the lesson for choosing your class is also to choose one that sounds really cool. So in this video, we're going to talk about thinking about what class you want to play and kind of what that mix of things is that goes into that decision, and then where you can find information to really dig into that class and understand what it's going to be like to play that type of character. And so if race is sort of the genetic makeup of your character, maybe the things that they're sort of inherently born with because of their DNA, class is what they're trained to do, whether they're going to be fighters or spellcasters, what have you. So if you're needing some help trying to figure out what class you want to play, this is the video for you. So there's a couple of ways to choose a class. First of all, you can go to the player's handbook here and then flip to chapter 3. There it is. And then kind of flip through alphabetically. And there's a nice little table here in chapter 3 on the front. I'll take a picture of it and put it up here in the corner so you can see it, and it gives you a nice little breakdown of what's going on with those classes. But one thing that's missing here, and one thing that I would recommend maybe thinking about as you're choosing a class, is to think about it in bigger buckets. So there's kind of 3 different types of classes. There's the martial type, which is all about fighting. There's the spellcaster class, which is very heavy on using magic, and then there are a few classes that are hybrids. So if you have an idea of what you want to play, either full on fighting, getting in there, mixing it up with monsters hand to hand, or using cool weapons, versus casting spells, maybe attack spells, or being kind of a healer, or do you want to be somewhere in the middle? If you can think about that, make that decision first, then you can narrow down which class that you might want to play. Sorry, give me 1 second. For example, you might have a familiar like Bella in your class. It's dinner time. All right, so the puppies are taken care of, and let's hop over to DnDBeyond and dig into those buckets that I was talking about. All right, so let's take a look at those 3 big buckets of class types. So we got the martial types that we talked about earlier. These are going to be the fighters, and literally fighter is probably the first class that comes to mind. Think about these as kind of their sword wielders, your axe wielders. And these are, probably the easiest characters to access when you're first starting out. I loved playing fighters as a kid. I used to spend hours drawing my fighter. So much fun, and drawing the weapons. Anyways, they get more complicated as the character levels increase with things like action surges and things like that. So they get plenty complex, but if you're just starting out, they're not a bad way to start. So there's the fighter, there's the barbarian, who's also just a bruiser. And they're going to rage to get them kind of into the fight. The monk, who's going to be using martial arts. The rogue, who's a more surreptitious fighter, right? They're going to be using sneak attack and things like that. So there's like 4 fighter options there. There's 6 spellcaster options. And the thing that differentiates spellcasters is kind of the source of their magic. And so think about that as you're choosing your spellcaster class. So wizards, you're going to be kind of using intelligence. They have a spell book, they're flipping through, studying spells. Warlocks and sorcerers are somewhat related. In my mind, at least, to wizards. I just visualize them all kind of having pointy hats. I don't know if that's realistic or not. But they have different, spellcasting abilities. And then, of course, the cleric is a classic, maybe the classic healer. They don't always have to be healers, but clerics are a very popular option. Almost every party loves to have a cleric. It should be a t-shirt that says, "Never leave home without your cleric." So that's 4. The 5th one is going to be a bard, who gets their spellcasting power from power of music. That was not very good. Even better. Power of music. And then finally the druid gets their power from the earth. Okay. And then there's the hybrids. And let's jump to DnDBeyond real quick so that I can show you what I'm talking about here with these hybrids. All right, here we are. And so we're going to look real quick at these kind of hybrids. So, the paladin and the ranger. I think about paladin as kind of like as a fighter plus a cleric combined, and then I think about a ranger as kind of a fighter and a druid combined. That's not a totally accurate, but they both have spells, but they're both also very martial kind of focused. So there's a lot to cover in classes, more than what this video is intended for. So I'm going to be making future videos that deep dive into each of these classes so that you can get through kind of the basic tutorial and create your player character sheet. But if in a later time you want to revisit a particular class and go into what happens when they level up, if your dungeon master allows you to take feats instead of ability score improvements, what kind of cool feats can you add to your classes? All that kind of stuff. So there's going to be future videos on that. Little teaser. Yeah, choose one that's awesome. That's kind of it. All right, so that's the video for how to choose your class. There's a lot there to take in, and just give that some thought. In next week's episode, we're going to be going down the player sheet and talking about what race and class mean in terms of the ability scores, and more specifically, we're going to talk about the 3 ways that you can get to those ability scores and start filling out that strip of numbers on the side of the player sheet. So like and subscribe to the channel, please, and hit the notification button at the top that lets you know when a new video is uploaded. They're coming out every Thursday, and then occasionally I do some announcements during the week. I've got a big prize giveaway where we get to 2,000 subscribers. I've got some news on that I'm going to tease out eventually as well. Think coinage in fantasy realms as one of the prizes. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.